Hi, welcome to Lori's Sketchbook. Thanks for being here. Today we're going to talk about my favorite materials and the ones I use every day. But my basic advice is you don't need many, less is better, and quality really matters. Let's start with the paper. Okay, so let's talk about my favorite materials, starting with paper. And that is because, in my opinion, the paper is probably the most important material you can have. I've come to do a couple of things. One is to have this Fabriano 50% cotton paper, which is very inexpensive here in Mexico, for a lot of my practice. So these may have a lot of these kinds of things and different exercises that I like doing, and I have it in different sizes. I have since decided that for the actual sketches, I often then turn to 100% cotton. This one is the Arches cold press. This one is, for example, Fabriano extra rough. So also by having different sketchbooks with different paper, you can do a lot of experimentation and find what kind of paper you like best. Or maybe you like one kind for one subject and another for another. But the paper is the most important thing of all. It needs to be at least 50% cotton, in my opinion. And 100% is better. So that's the paper. Now, in terms of things like the paint, I have a variety of palettes. Some I use more than others, but the ones I use the most, I wanted to show you the variety because each is a little different. This was my first palette. This I tend to use here at home because it's a little bit larger and a little more awkward if you're standing in the street. But it works great on a table. And I think the palette itself cost about $1, and they're still available. Has nice large wells, which is what I like, and I squirt in my tube paints. I would like to say a couple things about the paint itself. I strongly recommend that you, if you're serious about watercolor, that you invest in professional paint. Student grade paint has much less actual pigment in it and a lot more filler than professional. So in fact, with professional, because it is so pigment rich, you end up using less paint to get the same results. Therefore, I think in the end, it's probably a similar price, because I would go through student paint tubes very quickly since it just doesn't have the oomph that I want. So there are a lot of manufacturers of paint. My favorite happens to be Daniel Smith, but I use some M. Graham, some Sennelier, occasionally Winsor Newton. So there are plenty. What I recommend if you're a beginner is invest in a starter set of tubes and a cheap palette. I'll show you some more. And learn about the colors. And this palette isn't all Daniel Smith, but it's mostly Daniel Smith. The other thing I wanted to mention is when you do create a palette, I strongly recommend that you create a card like this, a swatch card, so that you can remember what are the colors in your palette. They're not always so clear, if you see, just by looking at them. Also, I have the name of the color and then the manufacturer. So this one, for example, is M. Graham, and this one is Daniel Smith. So that's important because all paint is not equal, and some colors may have the same name, but they will not be the same color. Also, I like to keep a record of transparency. These squares indicate transparency. If it's empty, it's transparent. If it has a line or is half dark, it's semi-transparent or semi-opaque. And if it's completely dark, none of these are, then it's an opaque paint. I need to remember that when I'm painting. It's very helpful, so I keep that record. The other thing is the G here stands for granulating, and that means that the actual pigment settles into the paper such that you can actually see it. Granulation is something that some people love and others don't. I happen to love it. So anyway, I keep that information. I recommend that you do the same so that you always remember what it is you have in your palette. So the palette I tend to take when I'm out and about is this one. This was a Sennelier palette that I took all of the metal infrastructure out and put in my own plastic pans because I liked it better. Again, I have a swatch card. This one fits on my board that I can use standing up when I'm outside. Then there's something, same thing, but it's a smaller version. You'll see this is as many colors as I think anyone really would need usually. So you don't need a lot of colors. In fact, fewer than that would be fine. But that's a small one. Then you can also make palettes. This one is made from a Johnson & Johnson medical kit, I think. And again, it's just pans, plastic empty pans that are stuck there with double-sided tape, and then I use my tube paint and fill it. This happens to be all M-Gram paints. A note about M-Gram, they're honey-based, they're wonderful paints. However, I tend not to take them out in the street anymore because if it's hot, humid, and you're moving it all around in your bag or in your hand, they can run and create a big mess. Not many of them run, but a few of the colors run a lot. So that's just a warning about M-Gram, although I love their products. And the last one I just wanted to mention, this is by arttoolkit.com. They make these wonderful little tiny palettes. It's magnetic on the bottom, and these are metal pans. You can buy different sizes of metal pans and arrange it however you want. And it's so small that I can just take it with me at no extra space or weight if I think I'm going to need opaque colors. This is my opaque palette, since, as I said, I prefer to use mostly transparent watercolors. I do keep some opaque ones like this for accents, etc. This is where I put my white gouache or white opaque paint if I use it. Okay, so those are the palettes. Now let's get to the brushes. So I have a couple of different sets of brushes. These stay at home usually, and I use them here. Most of them are these silver black velvet brushes, which I love. They are half squirrel and half synthetic. That was a cat hair. Which means they hold a lot of water. They're soft. They're very durable. This is the one you may have seen me use in a number of my videos. It ends up being a big favorite of mine. It holds an amazing amount of water and paint, and yet when it's wet, let me show you. When it's wet, it comes down to a wonderful sharp point. This is a big favorite. It doesn't happen to fit in my smaller carrier thing, so I tend only to use it at home. These are other silver black velvet. This is a squirrel mop. So these tend to stay here at home. The one I take when I'm out and about is this one. And in it is pretty much all I would need when I'm out sketching. I have a pencil. I like mechanical because then I don't have to sharpen it. Softer lead is better. This is my favorite pen. It was actually much longer, but I cut it off so it would fit in my thing. This is a platinum carbon pen, extra fine. It's just a wonderful, let me show you here. Yeah, I've got some squiggles already here. It's very, very fine, and you can, of course, do a little bit larger, but this is a favorite of mine. And I refill the cartridges by hand using a bottle of platinum ink, platinum carbon ink, and a syringe, which many of you can do to save the cost of cartridges. This is the Pentel brush pen, my favorite brush pen. You can see I was demoing this elsewhere. So at the end of this is actually a brush. And again, it has cartridges which you can fill from a bottle of paint. The platinum carbon ink works really well with this. So those are those tools. Oh, now in terms of brushes, I switch back and forth in terms of what larger brush I take with me. But this one came as a set of 3. I don't know if you can see the name there. Fuui Muui, Fuumuui, from somewhere in Asia. Perhaps it's Korea, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a red sable brush that holds a tremendous amount of water. And it's very good because it's the travel version and I can't damage it. This is another silver black velvet brush, like the ones you saw in the other packet. This is a big favorite. I've also used it a lot in my videos. It holds a lot of water and has a very fine point. This one is again half synthetic, half squirrel. So that's what I take out and about. Now there are a few other things to remember on occasion. This you always need. A mister with water. Watercolor is all about water, so make sure you keep your paints wet. So I have these all over the house. If I want to do any white accents at the end, this Uniball Signo gel pen is really fine for dots and dashes and fine lines. So I will use that one. I've tried lots of them. This one seems to work the best. If I want to use a white opaque paint for white features or accents or whatever, I use this Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White, which is not a gouache. I think it might be an acrylic. I'm actually not sure. I should know. But at any rate, it's extremely opaque. And with the brush, you can do all the same brush strokes as you would do with any paint. So I really like that. I don't take this with me out and about. That's just for back home. Okay, that's it. I hope that was helpful.